Okay, here is where things get weird. What Socrates now has to do, and remember Socrates is a mouthpiece for Plato, is make an argument in favor of love as that fourth kind of madness that's not bad, but is actually beneficial. Alright? And to do this, what Plato does is pull all of the elements of his philosophy together in one place. Alright? So, alright, the first thing, alright, on your page 29, that he begins the proof that this kind of madness is a beneficial kind of madness. The first thing that he does is offers the weirdest argument for the immortality of the soul that I have ever seen. Right? And I'll never test you on this particular argument because it's weird. It's an argument from motion, right? And it's sort of a causal argument, but it doesn't hang together like it should. So what we're going to do is not talk about it. I will say that in the Phaedo, right, what Plato does, right, in the last Socratic dialogue, in the Trial and Death of Socrates, or in the Five Dialogues book, what he does is he offers 5 much stronger arguments for the immortality of the soul, one of which we'll kind of take a look at in a couple of minutes. But, nonetheless, right, his proof begins with this idea that every soul is immortal, right? So we are just going to take this kind of for granted, right? It needs to be there, right, to get to what else he's arguing here, right? So there's an immortal soul, right? Now, what he mentions to us is that every living thing is a combination of body and soul, right? You can't have one without the other, right? Without a body, a thing is not living, right? So to say that the gods are embodied doesn't make much sense, right? Because they are pure soul and themselves completely immortal, right? It's this package of meat wrapped around our soul that constitutes our existence that makes us a living thing, right? And makes us, to some extent or another, mortal, right? Now, what Socrates does after this argument, rather than providing another argument for the immortality of the soul, which would have been good, right, is he tries to talk about the structure of the soul, right? And he uses a metaphor of a charioteer and a team of horses to describe this tripartite or 3-part soul, right? He tells us, right, and I'll just read it from your page 31 here, right? And I'll just read the paragraph here. Let us then take our soul to be a natural union of a team of winged horses and their charioteer. The gods have horses and charioteers that are themselves all good and come from good stock besides, while everyone else, all of us, have a mixture. To begin with, our driver is in charge of a pair of horses. One of his horses is beautiful, good, and from stock of the same sort, while the other is the opposite and has the opposite sort of bloodline. This means that chariot driving in our case is inevitably painful and difficult business. Right? So what Socrates here is setting up, right, is a 3-part division of the soul. Right? The 3 parts of the soul are likened to this chariot driver and the team of horses. Right? Now, the dangerous thing about this metaphor here, right, is that a lot of people take this in sort of a pseudo-religious kind of way to think that, you know, with us, there is an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Right? They're each chirping in our ear, and we determine which one to follow. Right? That's not what Plato is claiming with this metaphor at all. The 3 parts of the soul are represented by, reason, self-control, and immediate desire. Reason is the charioteer, and this makes a certain kind of sense because the charioteer, the chariot driver, ought be the one in control and tell the chariot where to go. Right? And quite consistent with Socrates' arguments and with Plato's arguments, reason ought be the determinant factor, right, in our decision-making process. We saw this in the Socratic dialogues. We shouldn't be led by desire, we shouldn't be led by our unreasoned opinions, but rather only through rational thought, right? So reason ought be in control. The other two parts of the soul are self-control, which is the good horse, the light horse, the upright horse, the horse that actually obeys the chariot driver, right? And the other horse, the dark horse, the jerk horse, the one that doesn't pay attention to us, is our immediate desire. And each of these parts of the soul want something different. Reason tells us what is best for us. Self-control tries to urge us in the direction of doing that which is best, and immediate desire tends to get the better of us, right? And drags us more or less kicking and screaming towards things that we know aren't a good idea or aren't in our benefit. Now, right, if we're likening this soul to a pie chart, right, and trying to figure out what constitutes what part of the soul, right, what we find is, in terms of Plato's theory, using this metaphor quite nicely, how big is a horse, how big is a human? Horses are bigger than humans, so if reason is supposed to represent the charioteer, the rational part, this part that distinguishes us from animals, right, the part that tells us the difference between good and bad and that ought be in control of us, is only a teeny tiny little chunk of our soul. Right? Now, in terms of self-control, right, this part of the soul represents self-control, right, that tries to be sort of the helpmate to reason and tries to get us to do that which is in our best interest. And the rest is desire. Right? Now you can see from this pie chart, this division of the soul, that desire is going to be the major influence in our decision-making process, and this is what poses a problem. Right? So what Plato has done by laying out the soul in this manner is shown us exactly what's going on. Love is some form of desire. We have at least two forms of desire. The one that follows reason, that's called judgment, and involves self-control, right, leads us towards that which is best. But quite frequently, right, desire gets the best of us. Right? Our immediate desire for sort of sex, drugs, rock and roll, cheesecake when we're on a diet, cigarettes, alcohol, etc., right, tends to get the better of us. So when we're debating in a normal situation about whether we should study and get good grades or go partying with our friends, right, this much of our soul tells us to study and get good grades. That's the good influence, right? But quite frequently we're overpowered by this desire for immediate pleasure. Right? So this is why love tends to pose a problem for us. Right? When we are talking about merely erotic love, it's this portion of the soul that has us, right, doing these stupid, foolish, wrong-headed, nasty, jealous, bitter, kind of hurtful things. Right? Now, it would seem off the cuff that Plato's solution might be to oppose this side to this side. Right? The better elements of our soul ought subdue desire. But there are at least two problems with that. One, right, even if we're successful, right, what we have is internal conflict. Right? One part of our soul is opposed to the other part of our soul, and that's a form of torture. Right? And secondly, if that's Plato's solution, and it's not, right, to oppose this side of the soul to the other, most of the time, just look at the size of them, most of the time we're going to lose.